Leave the section out, I want you to get in there, Junior.
I mean, it could reach the top of it. We want a 8-foot ladder.
Well, we gotta decorate it and then reach up there for the
Got one of those layups, don't you?
You ain't got one of them lamps spraying?
No, we'll come in and build.
Oh, Merry Christmas, everybody.
Christmas.
You know, one of the things that our author here talked about, I'm going to tell you this about this lesson before we ever get started. It's one of these that I don't know where to start. There's so much that I want to say, and there's so much we could talk about, but I don't really know where to start, and I don't know the direction it's going in. So it may be back and forth and everything else, but it kind of goes along with the book of John that we're talking about and studying, but I can't stand it no more.
Well, just stay back. Fogs up your glasses. It does.
I don't remember where I was going with that, what I was going to say. Oh, the author here, right here to start off in your book, he talks about telling people Merry Christmas. And he talks about saying that all the way through January the 6th. And I used to never understand. You know, it seems like in our church, and then I'm speaking of the Methodist church, we don't hardly do any Christmas songs before Christmas. Have y'all ever noticed that? That just always bothered me.
Me too.
Why do we not do Christmas songs before Christmas? Well, I understand about Advent and the preparation and prayer, but then all of a sudden after Christmas, it's like we start singing them. And, you know, I understand that, you know, we're really celebrating the birth of Christ after the day of the birth that we celebrate. And I get that. But as a young person, kid, I just didn't understand, why don't we sing some Christmas songs before Christmas? Everybody else does, why don't we? So I'm just going to say, we need to add more Christmas songs in the future before Christmas. But anyway, he talks about, you know, telling people Merry Christmas all the way through January. And the actual Christmas celebration is from Christmas Eve through, there's 12 days until Epiphany. So that's one of the things that I just had to say this morning. Our lesson today, you know, usually the week of Christmas, we have a Sunday school lesson that comes from Matthew, Mark, or Luke, and they talk about the birth of Christ. And today we have a different Christmas story to tell, and it's from John, and John is. John had a purpose in his writing, and it may have been the fact that John was written so much later than the other Gospels, and he had time to reflect on exactly what he wanted to say and comment on. But we're going to start today at the very beginning of Mark, or John, I'm sorry. And in that, you know, there is a whole, I'm sure, in theology classes, there's probably a whole course just on the beginning of John. Isn't that correct? Probably will. Just on what he says there. But we're going to break it down this morning, just the first few verses, and talk a little bit about them. Starts off, and our scripture lesson today is verses 10 through 18. But I'm going to start off with the first verse anyway. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. What's that saying? Who's the Word?
Jesus.
Jesus is the Word here, according to John. And it says, in the beginning beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Okay? Now, verse 2, He was with God in the beginning. All things were created through Him, and apart from Him, not one thing was created that has been created. Life was in Him, and that life was the light of men. I'll say it again. That life was in Him, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, yet the darkness did not overcome it. Skipping to verse 10 now, where our scripture begins, it says, He was in the world, and the world was created through Him. Yet the world did not recognize Him. Now, let's go back a little bit. When we think of Christmas, when did Jesus come about? Not when we think about Christmas, though. What do we think about? We think about when He was born, right? We think about the birth of Christ, and we think about the fact that He was born to Virgin Mary and so forth and so on. And we think of that so much as Christmas, but according to John here, what does he tell us? He's always been with us. He's always been with us, and He was there from the very beginning. I'll try to read from your book rather than mine. I'll start again. The light was in the world, and the world came into being through the light, but the world didn't recognize the light. The light came to His own people, and His own people didn't welcome Him. What's that saying?
The Jews.
Who's His people?
The Jews.
The Jews. Now, but what about even when He went to, y'all remember a few weeks ago we talked about, I don't remember if it was Sunday school lesson or Will talking, but y'all remember just a few weeks ago we talked about when He went back to preach in Nazareth? What happened to Him there? What did they try to do? They tried to kill Him, and then it just says that he walked away unharmed. But they even the people didn't recognize who He was. Now, let me get over here for just a second. I want to go back now, and I said I want to be topsy-turvy. The purpose of our lesson today is to affirm that when we welcome Christ, He enables us to become God's children. And the main question today is this, and I'm going to go ahead and go to the end. What does it mean to be a child of God? Now, there was a story in this other book here, and it talks about Elijah Cummings, and he was a congressman who passed away last year. But it talked about right until his dying day, he had a big scar on his face. And he tells the story of when he was a child, 11 years old, 1962, in South Baltimore. Him and some of his buddies going to a, quote, public pool. It was a public pool, but had not been integrated. So him and his buddies go and jump in the pool, and he said, we're in there playing, and next thing we know, people come up with signs and screaming, yelling at us to get out of the pool. And he said before long they started throwing sticks and bottles and everything at us. And he said they called us everything but a child of God. In that sense, what does it mean that he used it in to be a child of God? Aren't we all? It just means another human being, right? We're all children of God, we say. But for John, it says that it means something so much different. For John, it says, for John, the phrase is virtually synonymous with follower of Jesus. So, as we read these next few verses, I want you to keep that in mind. But those who did welcome him, those who believed in his name, he authorized to become God's children. Okay? Now, in your book, on page 28, it says in the second paragraph, it says in many parts of Paul's writings, for example, Paul writes about how we have been adopted by God. John uses the term authorized. He authorized them to become God's children. John says that those who are authorized to become children of God did not receive their position as God's children by the nobility of their birth. There are no blue bloods. Talks about not even preachers' kids. But even in believing family like ours, they must be born of water and the Spirit themselves. The children of God who did not gain that status through human desire. He is simply saying that we do not join God's family by natural means. As Jesus told Nicodemus, whatever is born of the flesh is flesh, and whatever is born of the Spirit is spirit. Finally, John explains that we do not become children of God by the way of our passion or the will of man. No other human being can make us God's children, not the church, not the pastor. Neither can we will our way into God's being God's son or daughter. Church rituals and ceremonies have their place, but they do not actually authorize us to be children of God. Now, I want you to think about all I just read there for just a second. How do I become a child of God?
Accept him in your heart.
Is there anything that I can do for that? Can I go out and work for that?
No.
Can I come to church every Sunday for that? Can Will stand up here and reason that into me?
No.
So you're telling me the only way that I can get that is by nothing that I really do, is it? It's a gift. It's what we refer to as grace. So to become a child of God, what does that mean? We're going to get to that. Hold on. Not that I have the answer. I don't. I want you to keep thinking about it. And then he writes this. He says, the author of this writes this. I find it curious that John actually says that God's children are born from God. Now let's read that. He authorized to become God's children, born not from blood, nor from human desire nor passion, but born from God. How can I be born from God? How can I be born from God, though? Remember what he told Nicodemus? Well, can I be born again? Through my mother's womb? Did we talk about that? Well, we can't. So how do we be born of God? Through our baptism, but by what? By acceptance of Jesus' grace to us. The Word became flesh and made his home among us. Wow. What is the Word became flesh and made his home among us? Now, let's talk about that Word again. Who's the Word?
Jesus.
Where was Jesus at in the beginning?
God.
So why would Jesus The Word became flesh. Why would he become flesh?
So he could live like we did, so he'd know how humans did.
He was the only sacrifice that was acceptable.
And made his home among us. You ever thought about that for just a second, though? I want you to think for just a second. I'm sitting at the hand with the hand of God next to it. I'm going to come to earth. I'm going to come and become a human. You're talking about lowering yourself.
And a servant.
He lowered himself beyond that of a servant. He lowered himself into that of a slave, nearly. To the slave, all to the point of death. So that what could happen?
We just had eternal life.
Wow. Thought this was a Christmas story, didn't y'all? But when we think about that, it just tells us how close the Christmas story is to the death on the cross and the resurrection for us. The Word became flesh and made his home among us. We have seen his glory, glory like that of a father's only son, full of grace and truth. And ask the question, it says, what do you think about those who have not seen the light? Because it goes on up here and it talks about, that's the wrong question, that's the wrong point, what I wanted to mention. It goes on right there on page 29 if you have your book. It talks about a little bit about dualism and so forth. It says, John uses it here to say that those who received Jesus and those who didn't, those who get it and those who don't. John may have also been from a group of Christians who were born Jews but split off from the Jewish community, saying that Jesus of Nazareth is the Messiah. This might have upset some of the Jewish community, who then started persecuting the new Christians. The Christians, in turn, might have started circling the wagons and trying to distance themselves from their critics. But what does it mean? I'm getting away from what I'm trying to get to there. But what if we're all children? If we're all children of God, what about those that don't accept Jesus? Are they orphans? What did we talk about a few weeks ago? We talked about being created in the image of God. Do y'all remember that? How does that relate to that? You know, we talked about what that meant. But being that we say the words we are children of God, we're all children of God.
It's that relationship.
But to John here, the children of God are those who what? Have accepted Jesus. It says, nevertheless, Jesus came into the world by becoming flesh. His true light shined on all people. He made his home among us. It says, in what way did you become a child of God? In what way did you become a child of God? Now, it goes on, it talks about your reply right underneath here. It talks about, it says, with DNA testing available by mail orders. Anybody have you done the DNA test? What's that called, Angela?
There's a bunch, there's 23andMe and
Yeah,
Ancestry.com.
yeah, there's a lot of those out there. And why don't we do that?
Want to know our roots.
Yeah, any of y'all curious about that?
No.
No? You don't want to know?
You might not want to find out once you find out.
That's true. true. And, you know, every one of you are kin to somebody famous, I'm sure. I'd be afraid if I'm like John, I'd be afraid to find out who I'd be kin to. Really, I am. But it says it's not hard to see the appeal of taking a DNA test. But John is telling us that God authorizes us to become part of God's family and to become children of God. And I want us just to talk about that for just a second. What does it mean, literally, to be a part of God's family? I don't have an answer. I need God to help me.
That we have a relationship with him.
We have a
We're set
relationship.
aside. We're different from the world.
I think that is the key point right there. To be a child of God, to be a true child of God, to be a part of the family, you're different. And you're different in a very good way. But now, does that mean that you get special privilege? Does that mean that things are going to be smooth and easy and wonderful? There's some
Ministries that say that.
There's some people out there that says it.
A lot of people are disappointed too.
And then when they don't get the riches and the fame, very disappointed. But when you look in the mirror every morning, other than seeing that I'm getting older and grayer, what do you really see? And what can you be proud of? Not to a point of being haughty or big-headed, but do you see that you're a child of God? And when you're a child of God, there's some special meanings that go with that. Some that are very tough to understand and tough to take. But also, going back to what we talked about before, because I'm a child of God and have that relationship through His grace, I can accomplish a lot of things, can't I? One of those being that we not only are we a child of God and we're part of God's family, we get to come together and be a part of a family here too, right? So as we can appreciate those concepts in our personal experiences with God, we all want to belong to God, to be God's children. Perhaps we were taught as a child that you are a daughter or son of God. It was foundational to your earliest understanding of your relationship to God. Knowing that you are a son or daughter of God is important for all children. But it is profound for any child who has lost one or more parents to death, absence, or other circumstances. He goes on page 32. Like all children of a parent, we are subject to our heavenly parent's rule. Did any of your dad ever say, "Might as well live under this roof if you want"? Y'all ever hear that? And did any of you ever hear your parents' voice come out in you? The one that you said, "I'll never be like that." You know, I hate to say it, but I do. Wait, Angela, would you go outside for a second? I can remember my dad, he worked all shifts, but, you know, he had to go to bed early to get up early, and of course, we didn't want to go to bed that time, and I get it. I understand. But I never understood him to say, you know, he would do an imitation of my dad coming down the 4 or 5 little stairs that we had there in his underwear. All right now, y'all get to bed. I got to get up in the morning. And I hear that coming out of me now all the time. And I don't want to be that person. I really don't want to be that person. You know, like now that all Angela's kids have come home, and we were still working for the last week or so, you know, and I'm going, I gotta get up in the morning, man. Y'all gotta be quiet. I don't want to be that person, but here it says, as long as we live under God's roof, God is in charge. So only God can authorize us to become God's children. And that's the amazing news. Even though Jesus was rejected and despised, God still authorizes us to become God's children when we welcome Jesus and believe in His name. Even though we were in darkness, God sent a true light. That light shined on everyone, even though everyone did not recognize it. Now we're 2,000 years later. Why doesn't everybody recognize this now? Why is that darkness still so appealing? Why has it overshadowed the light for so many? Well, you gotta remember, what's our call to do? Our call is to spread that light, right? And it's just to tell others so that others can become children of God. Do we do a very good job of it sometimes? No. We don't. I'm the world's worst. But this is what we're called to do. And we are children of God. And the Christmas story here is that Christ came, but He came at the very beginning. It wasn't just his heavenly or His birth here on earth. He was with us all along. And He still is. But being a child of God means that we've still got to accept that. And we've got to live by the rules that God has given us for that. So our Christmas message is take that out from here and spread that. Spread that good news. Spread that cheer. So that everyone can enjoy the Christmas story. And it says, here we are with Christmas in 5 days. And the miracle of Christmas is this: that Jesus is born into the world He created and loves, even though the world did not recognize His light. As you go about your beloved Christmas traditions, gathering with friends and family, I hope we get to do some of that, exchanging gifts and going to Christmas worship services. Remember the cosmic significance of what has happened and see the light again. Give God thanks for coming into the world in the person of Jesus Christ to set everything right. That includes making us children of God. We'll close with this prayer. I thought this was a great prayer, so let's just close with it. Thank you, O God, for shining your light on the world. Thank you, Word of God, for becoming flesh and making your home among us. By your grace, may all the world come, see, and believe. Amen.